This video is for the unboxing and assembly of the Harvey Big Eye Rip Fence system. First, we will start by unboxing the Big Eye fence system. When unboxing the Big Eye, do note that there are two packages total for the full assembly, one package being the fence and the other package being the rails. In the rail packaging, you should receive the following items: the rear guide rail assembly, the rear extension table fixed blocks used for mounting the RT10A rear tables, connecting rod assembly used for supporting the front and rear rails, a set of scales both included in metric and imperial. Do note that the imperial scales are installed on the rail. And lastly, the front guide rail assembly. To summarize, you should have the following items: the front guide rail assembly, the rear guide rail assembly, the rear extension table fixed blocks, the set of scales, and lastly, the connecting rod assembly. Next, we will unbox the second package, which includes the fence assembly. When unboxing the fence assembly, do note that there are hardwares and tools included inside the box. To start the assembly process, we will start by installing the front guide rails. We will need the mounting hardware along with the wrench and a small ruler or scale for aligning the rail. Note that the mounting hardware has three possible positions, which are the following. If you are installing the Big Eye fence system on an alpha table saw, do note that you will be using the highest setting as seen here for installing the rail. To determine the correct position of the mounting hardware, you will need to measure the distance from the top edge of the table to the center of the drilled hole. In this specific scenario, we've found that the hole is 29 millimeters from the top, so we will set the mounting hardware in the highest position as seen here. Before mounting the rails, make sure that the main table and extension tables are flush with each other at the front. This will make the installation process much easier. After determining the correct position for the screws, we will slide the screws into the front rail as seen here. We will use the 55mm eccentric screws for the extension table and the 40mm for the main table. We will install and position them to match the holes and slide them right in place. We will need to align the front rail to be flush with the left wing. Using a small scale or ruler, slide the rail over to the left so that it matches up as seen here. Once the front rail is in place, we will now install the flat washer, spring washer, and hex nut to secure the front rail into place. Tighten the hex nuts so that it secures the rail. Next, we will be installing the extension table. Do note that the extension table mounting holes must be leveled with the holes on the main table. For other models besides the Alpha series, some modifications may be needed. For the Alpha series table saw, hand tighten the extension table mounting bolts to loosely hold the table in place before making any adjustments to the table. We will need to use a straight edge to level the extension table before tightening up these mounting screws. Now we will start the process of mounting the rear rail. For any table saws that does not come with pre-drilled holes, you will need to drill and tap 3 threaded holes in the rear for mounting the block. This process only applies for table saws that does not have pre-drilled holes. To determine the distance from the top, use the provided template to mark out the distance from the top of the table to the position where the hole should be drilled. Please refer to the manual for more details on drilling the holes. For table saws with pre-drilled holes, we will use the eccentric screws and slide them into the rail that matches the same position as we did with the front rail. We will align it and install the rail as seen here. Before securing the rail, make sure that the rail aligns with the edge of the main table before securing it in place. If you haven't done so, the next thing to do is install the support legs for the extension table. Next, we will level the table saw by extending the support feet so that they contact the floor firmly. Make sure to check the extension table is leveled and make any adjustments to the leveling feet if needed. Now we will install the connecting rod assembly. If your table saw has a router table installed on the right side, then you may choose to omit this component since this is used to support the front and rear rails. To install the support rod, loosen the nut and adjust the spacing on the left and right lead screw to ensure that the length of the rod is slightly less than the width of the table. Next, we will install the eccentric screw on both ends of the connecting rod. With the eccentric screw still loosened, install the ends of the connecting rod assembly into the T-slot of the front and rear guide rails. Slide the connecting rod up to the extension table and using a wrench to tighten and secure the eccentric screws. Once the eccentric screws are secured, rotate the connecting rod so that the spacing of the guide rails match with the width of the table, and fasten the nuts on either end. The purpose of the connecting rod is to reinforce the rails to prevent flexing caused by the fence when it is clamping under pressure. The connecting rod also helps allow you to adjust the front and rear rail to be parallel with each other. Once we've installed the connecting rod, we will now assemble the fence assembly. To ensure the fence fits properly onto your table saw, check the pointer on the rear locking support and set the width to match the front to rear distance of your cast iron main table. If the width of the table is between 685 to 690 mm, first install the rod sleeve. If the distance of the table from front to back measures between 690 mm to 795 mm, you will need to modify the rod sleeve by shortening it to equal the distance of 800 mm minus the width of your table. To adjust the position of the rear locking support, flip the fence assembly upside down and loosen the screws on the support and the rear bracket locking block as seen here. Once the screws are loosened, slide the rear locking support until the pointer aligns with the scale indicating the correct width of the table. Then secure the screws that were previously loosened. For installing the rod sleeve, you will need to loosen the M6 set screw and remove the rear locking knob as seen here. Remember that if the width of the table is between 690 and 795 millimeters, you will need to modify the length of the rod sleeve as needed before installing. Slip the rod sleeve into the locking rod and then screw the rear locking knob back on. Do not tighten the set screw at this point because we will need to make adjustments later on. Before installing the fence onto the rails, depress the safety stop on the front of the guide rail. When installing the fence, remember to release the locking handle before installing it into the front and rear guide rails. Align the bearings with the steel rods on the front rails. For the rear guide rails, slide the rear locking support onto the rail as shown. After installing the fence, remember to release the safety stop to prevent the fence from accidentally sliding off the guide rails. Out of the box, the slider and guide rails are factory calibrated. However, if you notice any wobble or movement in the assembly during use, follow these steps to adjust the bearings. First, you will want to loosen the fence locking knob and remove the fence extrusion. Using a small flathead screwdriver, remove the magnetic sealing covers. Next, loosen the 3 set screws on the eccentric nuts as seen here. Once the set screws are loosened, rotate the eccentric nut with a 8mm hex wrench until the fine adjustment knob contacts the guide rail. After adjusting all 4 eccentric nuts, tighten the set screws back up and reinstall the sealing covers. If the fence locking handle is not applying enough locking force, you will need to fine-tune the front and rear clamping mechanism. To adjust the locking force of the front locking handle, you'll need to loosen the screw completely. Then tighten the screw until you notice some resistance. From there, rotate the screw by 1/6 of a turn counterclockwise. To adjust the rear locking force, start by raising the lock handle. Then, loosen the M6 set screw on the rear locking knob. Turn the knob counterclockwise to disengage the clamping mechanism. Now, rotate the knob clockwise until you feel some resistance. Then, rotate it counterclockwise by approximately 1/8 of a rotation and re-secure the M6 set screw. When tightening the set screw, be careful not to rotate the rear locking knob as well. Use a non-marring plier to hold the knob steady if needed. Once you have made the adjustments, lower the fence locking handle and check to see that the fence is secured on both ends. To adjust the fine adjustment knob, use a 4mm hex wrench to gently turn the eccentric shaft left or right until the knob can be operated smoothly, as seen here. The fence height position can be adjusted using the 3 eccentric position blocks on each side of the fence body. To adjust this, loosen the M4 eccentric screw using a 2.5mm hex wrench, then manually adjust them to a higher or lower position as needed before tightening the screw. After adjusting the eccentric screw, reinstall the fence and secure it with the red locking knob. Remember to verify that there is enough clearance underneath the fence preventing any contact with the table surface. Now we will check the fence to make sure it is perpendicular to the table using a calibrated 90-degree reference, such as a combination square seen here. If the fence is out of square, we will need to first verify that the table surface and the guide rails are both leveled with each other, ensuring that they are paralleled. If the fence is slightly out of square, we will need to fix this by installing some copper shims. Start by loosening the fence locking knob and slide the fence forward to access the M6 screws securing the fence body. Next, lift the locking handle and use a hex wrench to remove the M6 screw seen here. Then, loosen the 2 M6 set screw located here. After removing the screw, if the fence body does not detach from the slider at first, disengage the front locking block by loosening the screw using an M6 hex wrench. Then, use a flathead screwdriver to gently pry the locking block back to release it. Once the fence body detaches from the slider, lift and place copper shims on either the left or right side as needed. Check the fence and table for perpendicularity and use shims accordingly. Once the fence is squared to the table, reinstall the M6 screw at the top and the M6 set screw on the front to secure the fence body back into the slider. You will need to readjust the front locking force by raising the locking handle and adjust the locking block until you feel noticeable resistance, and then back the screw about 1/6 of a rotation counterclockwise. Then check the locking handle again to ensure that it properly engages and disengages. Next, we will be tuning the fence to be parallel with the T-slot. For this process, we recommend to have a T-slot dial indicator to calibrate the parallelism of the fence to the T-slot and the blade. When setting the fence up, we will need to engage the locking handle and position the flip stop firmly against both sides of the fence slider. This will prevent the fence from sliding as we release the fence locking handle. With the dial indicator zeroed out, slide it in the track from one end to the other to get the initial reading and verify that the fence is parallel to the miter slot, which should be parallel to the blade. Next, we will slightly loosen the 6 screws that secure the fence body to the slider. To fine-tune the fence, we will adjust the 2 set screws located at the front of the slider. This will push the fence to the left or right depending on the set screw that we adjust. Rotating and advancing the left screw pushes the fence clockwise or towards the right, while adjusting the right screw will push the fence counterclockwise or towards the left. It is important to remember to leave a few thousandths of tolerance at the rear end of the fence. If the gap at the back of the fence is narrower than the front, this could cause the workpiece to get pinched during cutting and lead to kickback. If done correctly, we should see a few thousandths wider at the back of the fence and 0 at the front, as seen here. Now we will set the high and low stops for the fence. To do this, we need to raise the blade to its highest position. With the fence in the high position, release the locking handle and slide it over to the blade to where it barely touches the blade. Next, slide the scale so the 0 lines up with the red mark on the fence. Once the 0 position is determined and set, slide the fence out of the way and use a hex wrench to loosen the stop block and slide it over to where it meets the scale and secure it back into place. This will set the high position. To set the low position of the fence, we will need to loosen the knobs on the fence and bring the fence to the low position, as seen here. Once the fence is set in the low position, secure the locking knobs and then slide the fence to where it touches the blade. Slide the scale so that the 0 lines up with the red mark on the fence. Using a hex wrench, loosen the stop block and slide it over to touch the scale, setting the low position. The Big Eye fence system has 4 flip stops that can be set at any position on the front rail. To set this, you will need to use a hex wrench to loosen the flip stop and slide it over to where it touches the fence. From there, secure the screw back into place. This will set the position of your flip stop. That concludes the installation of the Big Eye rip fence system. If there is any questions, then please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you for watching.